Takumi has been summoned to another world and finds himself standing before the goddess Norn, but the first thing she does is sincerely apologize because this was all a huge mistake. Norn explains that when a summoning spell is activated, it randomly selects many losers from Earth to be summoned. But Takumi's life was actually going pretty well, so he was meant to be excluded from the summoning. However, an error occurred causing him to be dragged here alone with all the others. And it's all because the Holy Sidonia Empire recklessly activated the summoning spell. Since Takumi was never meant to be summoned, Norn brought him up here instead, while all the other summoned heroes went straight to Sidonia. Takumi asks Norn if she can send him back to Earth since he was summoned by mistake, but unfortunately, Norn can't do that. Norn was so pissed off at Sidonia for using the forbidden summoning spell that she immediately patched it out of this world's magic laws so that no one could move between worlds anymore, and that meant Takumi was stuck here permanently. The process also killed him, so there is that too. Takumi starts freaking out upon realizing that he is now a ghost, but Norn only tells him Takumi doesn't have to worry because she has a plan. Norn can't send him back to Earth, but she can give him a new body and have him become a citizen of this world instead, and as an apology since this is partially her fault, Norn offers to grant him her blessing to make his life easier. Takumi doesn't have much of a choice, so he agrees to be reborn into this world. And Norn is glad to hear that because it makes this a lot easier for her. Norn tells Takumi to open his status screen to check out the new life he will have, and when Takumi does, he finds out that Norn is planning to give him a 17-year-old body, even though Takumi is 40. Norn tells Takumi not to bother with the minor details, but more importantly, he still needs to pick out his job. Norn tells Takumi that there are two main classes for jobs, so if he wants something more combat-focused, Takumi can pick things like a swordsman, knight, or hunter, but if that doesn't appeal to him, he could always pick one of the production jobs instead. Takumi doesn't like having to fight, so he decides to go with a production job after all. Then Norn implants the job in his soul, along with many other bonus blessings, and sends him on his way, completely forgetting to give him a tutorial. Takumi crash lands in the middle of a forest. After finally picking himself off the ground, he sees his reflection in the river and realizes that Takumi really has become a different person. Takumi decides to make the best of his new life and looks in the bag Norn gave him to see what's inside. Takumi finds some food rations and money in the bag, so he doesn't have to worry about starving. Then Takumi looked at his status screen and it looked like Norn really hooked him up with all the useful skills he could ever need. Takumi even has elemental magic, so he tries it out first to see if he can use it. Takumi opens his hand and calls out a water ball, and just like that, a water ball forms in his hand. The other elements work the same way, so Takumi is easily able to use them on his first try, but now he has figured out how his magic works, so Takumi has to start thinking about his next move and decides to head for the nearest village. While walking, Takumi comes across a stick in the middle of the path and it looks like a really nice stick, so he uses his appraisal skill to scan it and finds out that this is Trent wood. It is gotten from the Trent monster, and is useful for making things like magic staves and spears. So Takumi decides to put his modeling skill to the test and uses it on the wood to create a spear. Since the wood works so well, Takumi decides to scan around to see if there are any other useful plants nearby and finds a ton of them, so Takumi spends the next hour picking them, but now he doesn't know what to do with all these. They definitely won't fit in his bag, so Takumi might have to leave them behind. However, Takumi remembers that he has an item box skill, so he uses it to store all the plants. Just then Takumi heard someone scream, and a few moments later he saw a little girl run out of the bushes. The little girl comes to him for help because there is a monster chasing after her, and when Takumi turns to see what kind of monster it is, he finds a massive horned rabbit. The rabbit charges at him and nearly attacks Takumi, but at the last second, he freaks out and accidentally stabs the rabbit in the head, killing it instantly. Takumi is shocked that a beginner like him could win against a monster like that, so he assumes it must be because of Norn's blessing. But Norn had nothing to do with it, it's just luck. As a result of his fight, Takumi earns the job title of warrior, but Takumi is unhappy about it since he hoped to avoid fighting altogether. But that's not really important right now since Takumi still has to check if the little girl is alright. Molly says she is fine and explains that she was out here picking herbs, but Molly accidentally got too far from the bored village and ended up getting attacked. Upon hearing her mention of the village, Takumi gets excited and asks her if it is alright for him to come to the village. Molly tells him she will show the way, but before that, Molly asks if he plans to take that rabbit with him since their meat is tasty. Takumi realizes it would be a waste to leave it here, so he puts the rabbit in his item box, but immediately after doing so Takumi realizes that he just did that in front of Molly, even though Takumi was planning to keep his item box skill a secret. Takumi can do nothing about it now, so he and Molly start walking to the village. At the same time, the other people who got summoned have just arrived in the Empire of Sidonia. and they are incredibly confused about what's happening. None of them are hurt, but they have no idea where they are, and suddenly, they hear someone call out to them as heroes. A woman approaches and tells them they are no longer in their original world, and have been summoned to use their power as heroes to save this world. She introduces herself to them as the Empress of the Sidonia Empire Elizabeth, and one look at her face makes them realize that she is a shady person. Just then, Akane's unique skill activates, and it seems Norn granted her the blessing of revelation, so if she follows her gut instinct, Akane will naturally arrive at the right answer, and right now Akane's gut is telling her that Elizabeth is a dangerous person, so she can't be trusted. Meanwhile, Takumi has arrived in the board village and Molly's parents come out to thank him for saving their daughter. Molly's dad introduces himself as Bonga, his wife here is Martha. They think Takumi is a responsible guy to have traveled so far on his own. Takumi asks them if it would be alright for him to stay in this village for a while since he has nowhere else to go. They tell him Takumi is welcome to stay, but unfortunately they don't have an inn in the village, so there is nowhere for him to stay right now. But they could always build him a house though. All the villagers gather around an empty plot of land and are about to begin work, but Takumi wants to make himself at least somewhat useful, so he uses his earth magic to flatten the ground for the foundation. This is the first time Takumi has used magic on such a wide scale, so he almost passes out from mana depletion. The villagers are all amazed that Takumi can use earth magic so easily, so Takumi asks if they think he did something strange. But they tell him not to worry about it. Since Takumi has taken care of the foundation, the rest of them get to work assembling his house for him. And by the next morning, Takumi's house has been completed. Thanks to his carpentry, blacksmithing, and sewing skills, Takumi was able to make a good set of furniture for himself. But there is something else he has been meaning to try out. Takumi got a bunch of ores from the village blacksmith Babon, so he wants to try using alchemy to extract the metal. Takumi has iron ore, silver ore, copper ore, and even some magic iron ore. So he starts with the iron and tries to make an iron ingot from it. Normally this would require a large furnace and hours of work, but with Takumi's alchemy, he can do it all at once, but it drains a ton of his mana in the process. His first attempt at ore extraction was successful, and Takumi is really excited, so he wants to keep extracting as much as possible, so Takumi can make stuff with it later. A couple of hours have passed, so Molly comes over to Takumi's house to bring him some dinner, but when she opens the door, Molly is shocked to find him passed out on the floor looking like a dry crop. Takumi had overdone it with the ore extraction and nearly died from mana depletion. Then Martha and Babon gave him a recovery potion, so he is alright now and can keep practicing his alchemy, although they made him promise not to overwork himself anymore. Over time, Takumi extracted a bunch of iron, copper, and even a bit of gold, so he could make many useful tools with them. Once Takumi was done with alchemy practice, he would spend time with Babon in the forge learning how to make all kinds of weapons. The blade turns out really well, and it will be complete once Babon is done making the sheath. Takumi's blacksmithing skill is now at level 40, so he is done practicing that for now and decides to move on to something else. Takumi goes over to Bonga and asks if he can borrow a couple of potions, and Bonga has no problem lending him some, but all the potions are basic, so he won't get much use out of them. Takumi tells him that's fine since he only needs a template for what a potion should look like. Takumi is thinking of making some potions of his own with all the herbs he gathered in the forest, and Bonga is happy to support Takumi in any way he can. So Bonga offers to buy some potions from him if he completes the first batch. Takumi thanks Bonga and starts working on his version after he gets the basic potion. Takumi makes it with some hilcock leaves and water, and when he is done, Takumi puts it in a glass jar to compare it to the one he got from Bonga. Both are blue, but the one Takumi made is notably more blue than the one he got from Bonga. Also, it seems to have magic in it, but Takumi isn't sure if this is a success. Takumi will have to test the potion himself to ensure it isn't harmful. Still, Takumi doesn't want to end up dying if it turns out to be poisonous, so he decides to build up some poison tolerance, and the best way for him to do that is to eat whatever this is until Takumi is about to die, and then use healing magic to cure himself. Takumi has been doing this for a few hours and feels like dying. On the bright side, curing himself so much has granted him the purification skill, which will definitely come in handy at some point. As Takumi returns to his feet, he hears a noise behind him and finds a huge boar staring him down. The boar clearly isn't friendly, so Takumi grabs his spear and gets ready to defend himself. But as the boar charges at him and tries to use the spear, it shatters on contact, leaving the boar unharmed and Takumi without a weapon. Takumi tries to use all the magic he has available to him, but none of them do any damage to the boar, so Takumi's starting to panic here. Just when Takumi thought things couldn't get any worse, he noticed a poison spider behind him. It looked like it was getting ready to attack, so Takumi was completely cornered. However, instead of attacking him, the spider attacks the boar, causing it to miss Takumi. but the boar is still coming for him, so Takumi has to think of something fast. So far all of his physical attacks have failed, but there is still one thing Takumi hasn't tried yet. As the boar charges at him again, Takumi jumps into the air, and at the moment of contact he uses his alchemy skill on the boar's head and breaks it down. Thanks to his quick thinking, Takumi managed to survive, and now that he is safe, Takumi decides to check on the spider since it helped him out earlier. The spider is in deplorable shape after it got hit by the boar. Takumi decides to heal it so it doesn't die, and afterwards he gets up so Takumi can return to the village, but then he receives a notification telling him that he has successfully tamed the spider. Takumi didn't realize it was possible to take a spider, but he was hesitant to take it with him since the spider was considered a dangerous monster. However, the spider hits him with the cutesy eyes, so Takumi decides to accept it as his pet anyway, and to make it official, he names her Maple. A little while later, Takumi returns to the village and shows everyone the giant boar he killed. They are all amazed that Takumi could defeat something like that, but even more so that he managed to tame a poisonous spider, since no one has ever managed to do that before. That aside, Takumi suggests they all share the boar since he can't finish it alone, so a massive feast is held in his honor that night. While everyone else is having fun, Bonga brings the valuable leftovers from the boar to Takumi and tells him he can sell them for money if he heads to the nearest city, Bolton, so that will be Takumi's next destination. All the while, Goddess Norn has been watching over him. Norn is thrilled with how well Takumi is progressing, but one of her fellow goddesses asks her what she hopes to achieve by giving Takumi such special treatment. Norn gave him a special body, a special blessing, and on top of that, she had consented to him a whole year into the past, before Sidonia actually activated the summoning spell that brought him here. But Norn says she doesn't have a particular reason for it. Norn is just doing what she thinks is right. One morning, Takumi finds himself tied up in bed, and he already knows Maple is behind it. Maple apologizes, but Takumi has been so busy lately that she felt lonely and wanted his attention. Takumi realizes he has been so focused on his work that Takumi barely spends time with Maple, so Takumi decides to take a break from the day and play with Maple, which makes her really happy. Then Martha walks in to bring Takumi some lunch. It looks like something weird is going on between Takumi and Maple, but Takumi assures her that it's not what she thinks. Martha takes his word for it, but she can't help but notice that the silk Maple produced looks really nice, so she plans to make Maple to make as much silk as she can. Later that day, Martha has successfully created a spider silk shirt, and all the ladies in the village are in love with the texture of the fabric. Takumi hadn't realized spider silk was such a hot commodity, so the ladies explain that spider silk is a luxury item, so only nobles ever get to buy it. Martha asks Maple if she can make some more fabric for her, so Maple starts making it out, but this will take a while, so she doesn't get to play with Takumi anymore. Takumi is a little disappointed since he was looking forward to spending time with Maple for once, but he still has things to do anyway, so Takumi is not too bothered. It has been roughly a month since Takumi first came to this village and intends to head to the city soon to study his alchemy, but Takumi can't bring himself to say goodbye to all the villagers after spending so much time with them. Then Takumi goes to meet with Boban at the forge so he can continue his blacksmithing practice, and before long, they've made a chest plate that fits Takumi perfectly, and some steel-toe boots. Boban tells him that the boots will be useful if he ever needs to kick anything, but Takumi doesn't intend to do any fighting since he wants to be an alchemist. Just then, Bonga shows up and is glad to see that Takumi's armor is finally complete, but Bonga will miss him once Takumi is gone. Bonga knows Takumi can't stay here forever if he wants to expand his production business, so it's logical for him to head to the city where Takumi can sell more of his goods and get a reliable supply of materials. A Bolton trader will come to this village in a couple of days, so Bonga arranged for Takumi to ride back with him to Bolton. They are sad to see him go, but know this is for the best, so they tell Takumi to get his stuff ready. Takumi thanks them for all their help and starts heading back to his house so he can pack up. But along the way, Takumi runs into Martha while she is carrying a bucket of meat. Takumi asks Martha what she is up to, so Martha explains that she will throw away the innards of a horned rabbit that Bonga caught. The innards are the rabbit's most delicious part, but must be processed thoroughly to remove all diseases and parasites. This village doesn't have the equipment necessary to do that, so Martha has to throw the meat away so no one gets sick. However, Takumi tells her that won't be necessary since he can purify the meat. Takumi bends down and uses purification magic, so the meat in the bucket should be safe to eat now. But while Martha is indeed thankful, she is equally stunned that Takumi can use light magic. Martha tells Takumi that he probably shouldn't reveal that Takumi can use light magic when he leaves this village, because there are very few people in this world who are capable of that, so if people found out Takumi could use it, it would draw a lot of unwanted attention. Takumi takes note of her warning and promises to be careful about revealing his power, but in the meantime, while he is still in the village, Takumi plans to use every bit of his power to make their lives better. Takumi uses earth magic to build up a brick wall for the village's safety, and for convenience he builds them a water pump, as well as a couple of other things. By the time Takumi is done, this place looks like a whole new village, so when the merchant arrives he barely recognizes it. Bonda comes out to greet Papek, and after completing their trade deal, Takumi walks up so they can start going. Papek has already heard a lot about Takumi from Bonda, so he introduces himself and everyone asks if Takumi has ready all his stuff. Takumi assures them he hasn't forgotten anything, but there is one thing Takumi wants to give them. Takumi pulls out one of his potions from his bag and gives it to Bonda. Takumi already dropped off about 100 of these bottles at Bonda's house, so in the event of a disaster Takumi wants Bonda to use these to heal injuries. Papek is left in shock after seeing the potion Takumi made, so he asks to take a closer look. It is definitely a high-level potion, although Takumi doesn't seem to realize it. The rest of the villagers soon show up to bid Takumi farewell, so Papek says he will wait for them to finish their goodbyes before he leaves. Molly says goodbye to Maple, who is sleeping in Takumi's sack, and Martha hands him an outfit she and the other ladies made for him out of maple silk. Takumi is really grateful for their thoughtful gift and thanks everyone once more for being so kind to him, even though they haven't known him long. Then Takumi gets in the carriage and all the villagers give him a huge send-off, telling him he will always be welcome in their village. As Papek and Takumi head for Bolton, Papek mentions that the people of that village seem to really love him. Even the others in the carriage can tell that Takumi is practically family to them, and such a goodbye really makes Heath cry. By the way, these guys are heading for Bolton too, so the blonde guy introduces himself as Heath, the redhead is Riel, and the gloomy-looking guy over there is named Boger. They are all part of a C-rank party named Lion Fong, and currently acting as Papek's bodyguards. Although this region is peaceful, there isn't much for them to do. Riel notices that Takumi is holding onto his bag really tightly, so they ask him if something precious is inside, and Takumi answers, saying his pet killer spider is sleeping inside. The group can't believe Takumi managed to tame a killer spider, so Riel asks to see it, but he is being really creepy about it, so Maple ends up head-butting him in the face. Takumi apologizes profusely for what Maple did, but the others tell him there is nothing to be sorry about since Riel deserved it. Heath wouldn't be surprised if Maple's encounter with Riel makes her fear all humans from now on, but that doesn't seem to be the case since she seems to have taken a liking to Boger. While everyone starts fawning over Maple, Papek calls Takumi to the front because he wants to talk about the potion Papek saw Takumi holding earlier. Papek asks if more of those are in stock, because he would love to buy some. Takumi doesn't mind selling Papek the potions, but all of a sudden the horse stops and it looks like there is trouble ahead. A horde of goblins surrounds the carriage for an attack, which is terrible news. Still, the others seem pretty excited since this means they finally get to do something, so they tell Takumi and Papek to sit back and let them do all the work as they step out onto the field. There are roughly 20 goblins in the field, so they are confident they can handle this and start fighting. Riel shoots them down with his bow while Boger and Heath attack the rest with their mace and axe. Overall, it doesn't take long for them to wipe out all the goblins, so once they're done, they get to work dissecting the goblins so they can collect the magic stones. From what Maple has seen so far, she really likes Boger. Maple hates Riel and she doesn't really care about Heath. Shortly after, everyone got back on the carriage and their journey continued for the next 3 days until they finally arrived in Bolton. Once they enter the city, the members of Lion Fong head to the Adventurer Guild to report the success of their bodyguard mission, and Takumi follows them there since he needs to register with the guild to stay in this city. Takumi would have preferred to register with the Alchemist Guild, but there isn't one here, so he will have to become an adventurer instead. The receptionist Hans tells Takumi that he can use the Adventurer Guild card as his identification, and as long as Takumi does a simple quest once every month, it won't expire at all. Takumi ends up registering as an adventurer and presents Maple as his pet. After all the registrations are complete, Takumi heads to Papek Trading Company to work on a deal for the potions. Takumi has roughly 103 potions in stock, all of which are extremely high quality, so Papek is prepared to pay 10 silver coins for each healing and stamina potion, and 50 silver coins for each mana potion. Takumi does some quick math in his head and realizes he would make over 7 million yen from this deal. Takumi thinks that's way too much money, but on the contrary, Papek informs him that he could have made a lot more money if he already had a reputation as a producer. On that note, since Takumi intends to become a producer in this city, Paypek recommends getting a house with a workshop attached for convenience reasons. Still, Takumi hadn't even thought about where he would be living once Takumi got here. Paypek decides to help him a little and calls for his assistant Thomas, so he can show Takumi a good property with an affordable rate. However, when Takumi finally sees the house, it looks way more like a mansion, so he doesn't think he can afford it. Thomas assures him that the mansion is quite affordable, and he can guarantee that there are no ghosts here, so Takumi won't have to worry about that. Takumi spots the workshop connected to the house and starts considering the purchase since this place would be really accommodating for his work. Takumi can afford to pay for it since he got a lot of money from selling those potions to Paypek. After a little deliberation, Takumi eventually decides to pay for the mansion, so he tells Thomas he will take it. Thomas is glad to hear that and says he will get started on the paperwork immediately, so Takumi can move in tomorrow if he wants. But as they are walking through the city streets, Takumi smells something foul in the air. Thomas can tell that the smell is bothering Takumi, so he explains that the foul stench is coming from the sewers. Rich people have magical purifiers to cleanse their sewage, but the main city sewers have no such luxury. Magic purifiers are really rare since they are only found in ancient ruins and dungeons, so they are too expensive to implement in the city sewers. Some priests are periodically hired to cleanse the sewers with purification magic manually, but the sewers are still filthy most of the time. The next day, Takumi and Maple move into their new house, and the first thing Takumi wants to do is find a solution to the sewer problem. Takumi gets a piece of clay from Paypek's company, and after using magic to shape it, he uses fire magic, combined with space-time magic to bake it quickly. After doing that for a while, Takumi's mana was completely drained, so he had to drink a couple of mana potions. But on the bright side, Takumi did manage to complete his creation, a modern toilet. Just then, Takumi hears Paypek screaming from his living room, so he comes out to check what's going on, and finds Paypek wrapped head to toe in Maple's silk. Takumi asks Maple why she would do such a thing, but Maple thinks Paypek would find this to be fun. The comforting feel of her silk does put Paypek to sleep, but that doesn't make it right, so Takumi sincerely apologizes for Maple's actions. Paypek tells Takumi it's alright, but getting swaddled so suddenly did scare him a little, so he needs to use Takumi's restroom real quick. However, as soon as Paypek enters, he comes back out and starts asking what is this marvelous technology. Takumi comes over and explains that this thing is a toilet. Takumi attached it to a magical purification device to automatically clean itself once you finish your business. After you do it, purification magic breaks down that into inorganic materials, which get flushed down the drain. The system makes sense to Paypek, but the only way someone could possibly have made such a thing would be if you had an aptitude for light magic. Takumi realizes he may have messed up since Martha clearly warned him against using his light magic openly, so Takumi asks Paypek to please keep this a secret for him. Paypek understands why Takumi would want to keep his abilities a secret, so he promises not to tell anyone. But Paypek must have some of these toilets, so he asks Takumi if he can make 100 for him. Takumi hesitated to agree since making just one toilet was time-consuming. However, since Paypek is insistent, Takumi agrees to do it as long as Paypek can provide the raw materials. Paypek is really happy to hear that, but can't expect Takumi to make all those toilets by himself, so Paypek suggests that Takumi should make a slave contract. The suggestion takes aback Takumi since he would never want to get a slave, but Paypek points out that if Takumi is trying to keep his abilities a secret, then it would be best to get a slave to help with his work since a slave would be bound to secrecy. Having an aptitude for light magic is a big deal since it means God chose you, and as such, the Church of Divine Light would probably come after Takumi to force him to work for them. They profit greatly by monopolizing purification magic, so Paypek doubts they would be happy to learn that commoners can access cheap purifications through Takumi's toilets. But Paypek already knows how to get around the church, so Takumi doesn't need to worry about it for now. The most important thing is ensuring the church doesn't learn about his light magic. That's why getting a slave would be the best option for him. However, Takumi is strictly against slavery and says he will do all the work by himself. Just then, his guild card begins glowing, so Takumi takes a look at it. It displays a message saying he needs to complete a verification quest to maintain his status as an adventurer. So it looks like Takumi won't have time to make the toilets by himself after all, so he gives and agrees to buy a slave. Paypek takes Takumi to the Mulan Trading Company since they are the most ethical slave traders around. Paypek goes off to talk with the owner to get Takumi a good deal, and in the meantime, Takumi heads out into the garden because it looks pretty. There Takumi finds a beautiful elf girl sitting on a terrace, but the second she sees Takumi, she tells him to get out of there. A little while later, Papek introduces Takumi to the owner of the trading company Mulan and tells her that Takumi is interested in purchasing a slave from her. Although Papek mentions that Takumi was reluctant about the idea of purchasing a slave, Mulan asks him if there is a specific reason for this, so Takumi explains that in the land where he comes from, selling and buying people was abolished long ago, so doing it here doesn't sit right with him. Mulan can understand Takumi's concerns, but she assures him that in this nation at least the rights and privileges of slaves are preserved to some extent. Basically, the owner pledges to respect the slave's basic rights, providing food, clothing, and shelter, while the slave pledges to fulfill their duties. Duties are clearly laid out in the contract for the slave. But aside from that, the contract also makes it impossible for either the master or the slave to cause lethal harm to one another. Takumi is quite pleased to learn this since the slave contract is pretty much a regular job with some rules attached. Mulan explains that there are several different kinds of slave contracts. If someone becomes due to debt, they will be contracted until they earn enough money to pay back that debt. Other contracts are more permanent and are usually taken by criminals or people who end up being captured in war as an alternative to death. However, the large majority of slave contracts were made by those who were illegally forced into it by bandits. Papek thinks the most suitable one for Takumi would be a war slave since they can't be released without their master's permission, and while Mulan could certainly make that happen, she asks why there is a need to make sure the slave can never leave Takumi. Papek starts talking about how talented Takumi is with production, and how he doesn't want his secrets stolen, but Mulan wants to hear the reason from Takumi himself. Takumi explains that he is a producer, so naturally Takumi would like to focus on his work as much as possible. But that's a little hard to do since he also has to fulfill quests from the Adventurers Guild. Takumi is currently living in a mansion, so he will need someone to help manage it while Takumi does his work, and due to some particular skills he possesses, Takumi would like to make sure his slave can't tell anyone about him. Additionally, since Takumi will be taking on quests from the Adventurers Guild and harvesting ingredients himself, he also needs his slaves to be a capable fighter so they don't get hurt when they accompany him. Mulan realizes that Takumi has no ill intentions, but there is no way she is allowing him to force a single slave to do both housework and combat, so Mulan will only work with him if he agrees to buy 2 separate slaves instead. That being said, Mulan knows someone who would be perfect as Takumi's housekeeper, so she calls for Maria to come into the room. Maria was forced into slavery as a child and has been trained in reading, writing, math, and general housekeeping, so she should be a good fit for the job. Maria says she can handle the housework of a mansion all by herself, and Takumi is glad to hear it, but Maria can tell that Takumi is deep in thought, so she asks if something is wrong. Takumi tells her he is just a little confused since Takumi doesn't understand why no one has bought Maria yet, considering how cute and capable she is. Maria gets embarrassed by Takumi calling her cute, so he apologizes since it might have been inappropriate. Maria calms down and tells Takumi that she can only do the housekeeping work outlined in the contract and nothing else. Takumi says he is fine with that since Takumi only wants her to do housekeeping work, but Maria wants to clarify that she won't do anything else. Takumi doesn't understand why Maria is talking about it so much since Mulan already explained how these contracts work, but then Maria says she can't sleep with Takumi. Now Takumi gets embarrassed as well and assures Maria that he really does only want her as a housekeeper. Not for that. Takumi asks Maria if she still wants to form a contract with him, and Maria says she will be happy to work with him. Now that's settled, Mulan says she will begin working on the contract for Maria, but as for the battle servant, Mulan says she unfortunately doesn't have anyone who fits the description. Maria hears Mulan say this and says she knows Sophia is still here. But Mulan doesn't take kindly to being called out, so she tells Maria to return to her room and start packing her things. Once Maria is gone, Takumi asks Mulan if what Maria said is true, and Mulan admits that there is a battle slave in the building but doesn't think Sophia would be a good fit for Takumi, since she has a lot of problems. Mulan wants to end the discussion here, but Takumi is kind of curious about Sophia, so he asks to see her. Mulan reluctantly agrees to take Takumi and meet Sophia, and when they arrive at her room, Sophia is surprised to see that the visitor is the boy she met in the courtyard earlier. Mulan informs Takumi of Sophia's history and explains that she was captured as a slave of war in the battle between the Kingdom of Triaria and the Kingdom of Izure. Although this all happened more than 50 years ago, Takumi is shocked that Sophia is over 50 years old. So Mulan explains that the Kingdom of Izure is an elf nation and elves naturally live long lives. Sophia hasn't been able to form a contract with anyone because she has a scar on her ears, and her right hand and left leg both have impaired movement. This suit already be a deal breaker for anyone looking to buy a battle slave, but on top of that, Sophia also lost use of the elemental magic that elves are most known for, so she likely has a curse on her. Given all these facts, Mulan doesn't think Sophia will be able to help Takumi on his quests. But Takumi wants to confirm it for himself, so he asks for a minute alone with Sophia. Mulan decides to give him some time to talk to her, and once they are both alone, Takumi grabs Sophia's face and looks into her eyes. Takumi isn't a fan of using appraisal on people without permission, but he needs to check what Takumi is dealing with. Takumi looks at Sophia's status screen and, to his surprise, finds out that her stats are all great. Sophia's injuries do limit her abilities and she does have a curse on her, but if Takumi can fix that, Sophia will be the perfect companion in a battle. Mulan soon returns to the room to ask Takumi if he has decided yet. So Takumi tells her he wants to take Sophia. Sophia can't believe Takumi wants her and reminds him of all her flaws. But Takumi says he will fix it, so it won't be a problem. Mulan thinks Takumi's confidence is interesting, so she agrees to leave Sophia in Takumi's care. A few minutes later, Mulan finalizes the contract terms, so the final step is to execute it. The three of them gather together and Mulan uses magic to bind them to the terms of the contract, so once she's done, Maria and Sophia officially become Takumi's slaves. Maria thanked him for purchasing her and promised to work hard to meet his expectations, and Sophia did too. The three eventually return to Takumi's house, and as soon as he opens the door, Maple jumps out because she is excited to see him again. Maria and Sophia are worried for Takumi's safety, so Sophia is about to attack Maple. But before she does, Takumi stops her and explains that Maple is actually his pet killer spider. The two find it strange but decide to act like it's normal, and a little while later, Takumi shows them to one of the empty rooms in the mansion. Sophia and Maria really liked it, so Takumi told them that Sophia could have this one and Maria could take the room next door. Neither of them can believe that Takumi is willing to give them their own rooms, but it's not like he is using the rooms anyway, so Takumi thinks it would be nice if someone got some use out of it at least. There is also a large bath, so Takumi tells them that once they are done unpacking they can use the bath whenever they like, and Maria is excited about it. Later on, Sophia and Maria get into the bath and Maria talks about how glad she is that Takumi bought Sophia as well. If Maria is honest, she thought Mulan would never let Sophia leave because over the past 50 years, no matter how much was offered, Mulan rejected anyone who offered to buy Sophia. So for her to sell Sophia to Takumi, Mulan must have seen some good in him. Sophia admits that Takumi seems kind but is still skeptical since they know little about him. While Mulan was drawing up the contracts for the sale, Sophia got a glimpse of Takumi's file, and most of Takumi's history records like hometown or lineage were left blank. So if he is keeping that information secret, there must be something Takumi is hiding. After they are done with their bath, they head outside and are shocked to see that Takumi already prepared dinner for them. Maria is especially devastated since household work is meant to be her job, so if Takumi handles everything himself, she is as useless as a toilet. Takumi explained that he was trying to make Maria's first day on the job a little easier, but if it made her feel better, he would let her handle the rest of the chores independently. For now, Takumi asks them to sit down so they can all have dinner together, but Sophia is hesitant since servants usually don't get to eat at the same table as their master. Takumi understands that she may think his behavior is strange for a slave owner, but he doesn't want her to get stuck up on tradition. Speaking of tradition, Takumi doesn't really like the fact that they keep calling him master, so he asks if they can just call him by his name instead. Sophia asks if that's a formal order, but Takumi doesn't want to force her to call him by name if she feels uncomfortable with it. Although Maria seems fine with calling him by name. The next day, Takumi heads to Paypek Trading Company to pick up a package he ordered, and Paypek says he did his best to wrap it up securely, but Paypek still wants Takumi to be careful when carrying it home. On his way home, Takumi notices a church nearby, so he heads inside and kneels to pray to Norn. Takumi thanks Norn for all the skills she gave him since they've really helped him, but there is something he has been meaning to ask her. In the time Takumi has spent in this world, he learned that the Holy Empire of Sidonia controls the religious doctrine here, so Takumi doesn't understand why Norn has so much beef with them. Just then, Takumi hears Norn's voice and sees her standing before him, so he freaks out a little. Norn explained that she had heard him praying to her, so Norn brought him up here so they could have a little chat. And to answer his question from before, Norn doesn't like Sidonia because they don't follow her will. There are two religions in this world, the Church of Creation and the Church of Divine Light. The Church of Creation has worshipped Norn since it began, but the Church of Divine Light just does whatever the hell it wants. The Sidonia Empire ended up going on several crusades to spread their religion by forceful means, but while all this was happening, Norn chose to stay out of it since she didn't want to get involved with the petty affairs of humans. Takumi points out that was a dumb move since Sidonia could only activate the summoning spell that brought him here because Norn didn't intervene until it was too late. However, it sounds bad when Takumi says that Norn gave him all her blessings to make up for her mistake. Also, there is something Norn needs to tell him. Most of her blessings will remain with him forever, but there is one that will fade away. That is the unusually great luck he has been having recently. Norn basically gave him a beginner's tutorial by allowing him to meet such nice and helpful people. Still, soon Takumi will end up meeting people with sinister intentions, so from now on, the results of his actions completely depend on him. A little while later, Takumi returns home, and as soon as he walks in the door, Takumi trips over Maple, who is really excited to see him. Both Sophia and Maria come to check on him. When Sophia tries to help pick up the package Takumi brought, he quickly stores it in his item box to stop her from touching it. Then Takumi gets up and says he will do some work in his workshop, so they shouldn't bother him for a while. But Sophia is incredibly suspicious because that package had high-grade magical wrapping paper on it, so it must have been something dangerous. Sophia follows Takumi to his workshop to see what he is up to, and she is horrified to see him dipping a knife in poison and cutting himself with it. Takumi immediately heals himself afterward, but when he randomly mentions Maria's name, Sophia thinks Takumi plans to do something to her and attacks him, or at least Sophia tries to, but faints from exhaustion almost immediately. So Sophia just collapses on top of Takumi. Takumi checks her status to figure out what's wrong with her and discovers that Sophia is suffering from extreme exhaustion, likely due to her curse. A wound like this normally wouldn't be that difficult to heal, but because of the curse, it takes a lot of effort for Takumi to heal her hand finally, and once he is done, his light magic levels up. Takumi later carries Sophia up to her room, and since his light magic leveled up, he now has enough power to dispel her curse, so Takumi pours all his magic into it. Eventually, Takumi can fully heal Sophia as well as lift her curse. Sophia is still unconscious due to exhaustion, but should be fine once she gets a little rest. A couple hours later, Sophia wakes up, and when she sees Maria, Sophia warns her to run because from what she saw, Sophia is sure Takumi is an absolute lunatic. Maria doesn't know what Sophia is talking about, but she is sure that Takumi is a good person, more than ever before. Maria holds a mirror up to show Sophia what Takumi did for her, and she is shocked to realize that her body has been healed and her magic has returned. Sophia heads outside to talk to Takumi about it, and he confirms that Takumi did get rid of her curse. It took a lot of pain and hard work to level up his skill, but Takumi told her she didn't have to worry about it since he already promised to heal her. Sophia realizes that she has completely misjudged Takumi, so Sophia kneels and pledges to serve Takumi for the rest of her life for the kindness he has shown her. So now what will happen next? Subscribe to our channel to find out what will happen next. Friends, before we wrap up, we want to let you know that we've recently launched a membership program where you can enjoy perks like early access to videos and exclusive content just for members and many more to enhance your interactions. If you're interested, consider joining our membership. To enjoy these benefits, check out the link in the description to join. So friends, if you enjoyed our recap video, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.